Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll be making a long kaftan or shift dress with side pockets. So let's get started. For this tutorial, I'll be making use of these two fabrics. I have 2.5 yards of this yellow and black crepe material and a plain black fabric that I'll be using for the collar. So I'm going to head to fold my fabric into two, and this end here is a folded end. And the first thing I'll be doing is to mark my shoulder line. So I'm coming down from the top of my fabric by 1 inch. I'll go ahead to mark that point across, then square it out with my ruler, and there's my shoulder line. And from that line, I'll be taking the rest of my measurements, starting with my bust point at 11 inches. So go ahead to mark your shoulder to bust measurements, square that point out, and there's the bust line. So I tried using a different chalk color thinking it would be visible, but it was, so I'm going over the line again with my white chalk. Now the next measurement I'll be taking is my shoulder to waist measurement at 16 inches. So from the shoulder line, I'm going down by 16 inches, marking that point across, then I'll square it out with my ruler, and there's my waistline. Next, I'm marking my hip line at 25 inches. So again, I'm placing my tip from the shoulder line coming down by 25 inches. I'll mark that point across, go on to square it out with my ruler, and there's my hip line. Finally, I'm marking the full length of this shift dress, and I want mine to be very long, so I'll be using 58 inches plus 2 inches for hemming allowance, making it 60. So from the shoulder line, I'm measuring 60 inches downwards, which is the full length of this fabric, so I'll be using the entire fabric length. Now back to the shoulder line, I'm going to be creating the neckline and shoulder slope. For the neck width, I'll be using 3 inches, while for the front neck depth, I'm just going to be marking 3 inches. Although this won't be the actual neck depth for the front, I'll work on that later. Next, I'll be marking half of my across shoulder measurement from the folded end. For me, that's 8 inches, so I'm marking 8 inches along the shoulder line. And to that measurement, I'll be adding my sleeve length. And for my sleeve length, I decided to go with 10 inches, so I'll be adding 10 inches to the 8 inches I marked before. And you can even decide to cut your sleeve separately from the dress. I just wanted mine attached to the dress. So right now, I'm just extending the shoulder line to meet the point I marked for the sleeve. And from that point, I'll be going down by 1 inch. Then I'll go on to connect it to the neck width, and that will be my shoulder slope. So I'm just bringing in my ruler and connecting that point to meet the neckline, and then I'll be moving on to mark my sleeve opening. So first, I'm just extending my bust and waistline, and for the sleeve opening, I decided to go with 8.5, so decide how wide you want it to be. So from the end of the shoulder slope, I'm just going down by 8.5, and I'm marking that point. Then I'll move on to mark a quarter of my horizontal measurements. And I'm starting with my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 10 inches. And to that measurement, I'll be adding half an inch for ease, then 1.5 inches for the side seam allowance. So together that's 2 inches, so I'm adding 2 inches to that measurement. Next, I'll move on to the waistline to mark a quarter of my waist circumference. And this time around, I'll be adding 1 inch for ease instead of 0.5, and I'll still maintain the 1.5 inches for the side seam allowance. So the total allowance I'm adding to that measurement is 2.5 inches, while for the bust line it was 2 inches. Now moving on to the hip line, I'll be marking a quarter of my hip circumference plus 1 inch for ease and 1.5 inches for the side seam allowance. So the same allowance I added to the waistline is what I'm adding to the hip line. Now the exact measurement I have for the hip line, I'll be transferring it to the hemline. So the total measurement you have on the hip line is what you're marking here on the hemline. So now that I'm done marking all these points, it's time to connect them together. So I'll start by connecting the sleeve opening to the bust line, then I'll connect the bust line to the waistline, waistline to the hip line, and finally I'll bring in my ruler to connect the hip line in a straight line down to meet the hemline. Remember, the measurement I have on the hip line is the same measurement I have on the hemline. So now I'm going to measure along the shoulder line from the folded end to the point where I have my sleeve length. And I'm going to be marking that point here so that I can connect my sleeve opening to the shoulder slope. I forgot to do that earlier. So now that I'm done with that, I'm just going ahead to cut along the lines. I cut out the neckline, then I went on to cut along the shoulder slope, making sure to leave half an inch for joining. Now I'm just cutting the rest, following the shape of the dress. Okay, so I'm not done with the front piece yet. I need to use this to cut out the back piece, then I'll get back to it. Now for the back piece, I folded my fabric into two. I came down by 1 inch from the top and marked that as my shoulder line. I also came in from the folded end by 1.5 inches, and that will be my zipper allowance. So now I'm bringing in the front piece. I'm going to place this on top. You can see that I'm placing the center front after the zipper allowance, and I'm also matching the shoulder lines together. Once I've arranged this properly, I'll go ahead to pin this down before moving on to work on the back neckline. So for the back neckline, I'll be maintaining the same neck width, while the neck depth will be 1 inch. So I came down from the shoulder line by 1 inch, and I'm just going to connect that point to meet the neck width. I'll go on to extend it to the zipper allowance, and that's it for the back piece. Now I simply have to cut using the front piece as a template. So I've gone ahead to cut out the back neckline, and I'll simply use the front piece as a guide to cut out the rest. So I'm cutting following the shape of the front piece, and when I'm all done, I'll go on to create notches along the bust line, waistline, and the hip line. After creating my notches, I'll slash open the center back, and then along the waistline, I'll be coming in by 1/2 inch. And I'm going to create a small curve from the bust line to the hip line, making sure to touch that point. And I'm doing this to reduce the zip bulge at the back. So guys, that's it. I'm left with 2 pieces for the back. I'm going to take that out and go on to work on the front piece. And the first thing I'll be doing is to mark the true neck depth. And I decided to go with a neck depth of 7.5 inches, so decide how deep you want your neckline to be. You can also see that I'm placing my tape to account for the 3 inches I cut out earlier. So now from that point, I'll be coming in by 1.5 inches. That's how wide I want my collar to be. And remember, this is on a fold, so the actual width of the collar is going to be 3 inches. So decide how much you want to come in by, whether 1.5 or 2 inches, and just go ahead and mark that point all the way down. And after marking, I'm just going in with my ruler to connect it together. So just connect the 1.5 inches in a straight line all the way to the end. Alright, so now that I'm done with that, it's time to connect the 7.5 inch neck depth I marked earlier to the neck width. So I'll be using my ruler for this, and I'm connecting it to the neck width in a V shape. After which I'll go in with my scissors to cut following the shape of the new neckline. Then I'll just cut following the line I marked earlier all the way to the end. And that's it guys. Now I have 2 pieces for the front as well as 2 pieces for the back. And now it's time to start stitching. And I'll begin with the back. So these are the back pieces, and I need to stitch this down together. But first I'll be leaving out the space to attach my zipper. So from the top, I'm just measuring how long I want my zipper to be. And I want my zipper to stop at 21 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark that point. And from there, I'll be going in by the 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance. And I'll go ahead to stitch from there all the way down. So I've gone ahead to do that, and here's what we have. I used my zipper allowance to stitch all the way to the end. Now I'm going to open this up and turn it over to the right side because I want to stitch along the shoulder slopes. So I'll be bringing in the front pieces, and I'll be placing that on top of this, right sides facing each other. And I'm going to join them along the shoulder using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So I've joined them along the shoulder, and this is how it looks on the right side. Now I'm going to be attaching the black band to the hem of my sleeve. So first I'll open up my sleeve, and then I'll measure from one end to the other. And when I measured, I had 17 inches, so I'll go ahead to cut out the band using this length. And I have 2 pieces here, one for each arm. And the length for each of the band is 18 inches. I added 1 inch to accommodate any stretch, while the width is 4 inches. So when I fold the band like this and attach it to the sleeve using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance, I'll be left with a 1.5 inch wide band, and that's what I want. So I'll fold the band and place it on the right side of the sleeve like this. Then I'll stitch them together using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. And after doing that, here's what we have. So I went on to give this a good press so that it stays flat, and I did the same for the other hand as well. Now it's time to stitch down the sides, but first I went on to cut out my pocket pieces because I want pockets on the dress. But if you don't want any pockets, you can go ahead to stitch down the sides from this point. So now I'm placing my tape from the shoulder line so I can measure where I want to place the pockets, and I'll be placing them at 18.5 inches. So I'm bringing in my pocket piece and I'm placing it right sides to the main fabric. And I'm placing it from that point I marked. I'll go ahead and pin this down, then take this to the machine and run a straight stitch to attach the pocket to the fabric. I'll do the same to the back on the same side, then I'll attach the remaining 2 other pieces to the other side as well. I'm not being very detailed with the pockets because I already have a detailed tutorial on how to attach a pocket to a dress, so you can check that out. So I'll attach the pocket to the sides of the dress, and now I'm going to stitch down the sides. So I'll be stitching from the sleeve going down, then I'll stitch around the pockets, then continue all the way down. And I'll be stitching using the 1.5 inch sewing allowance. So I'll stitch down the sides and turn it over to the right side. And here's the pocket on this side. I did the same thing for the other side as well. Now the next thing to do is to attach the collar to the center front, and to do that first I'll go ahead to measure from the zipper allowance through the neckline and then all the way to the hemline. And when I measured I had 67 inches, so I'll go ahead to cut out the band for the collar using this length. So here are the bands, and I have two pieces here because they'll be attached to either side of the front. I also fused some interfacing to the wrong side of the band so it can be a bit stiff. And the width of the band is 2 inches when on a fold, which means if I open it up, that's 4 inches total. Remember when we cut the fabric earlier, I came in by 1.5 inches on a fold. So this band is 2 inches on a fold, so the extra half inch can be used for joining. Now remember the neck depth for the front is 7.5. And to transfer this measurement to the collar, I'll start by measuring from the zipper allowance all the way to that 7.5 mark, because we'll start attaching the collar from the back. And when I measured, I had 13 inches. So I'm going to open up both pieces of the collar like this and place them together, right sides facing each other. I'll go on to pin them down, then mark out the 13 inches I measured earlier. So whatever measurement you had, just mark it out here. And from that point, you're going to stitch all the way down, following that fold mark in the middle. So this is why it's important to fold the band for the collar. It just makes everything easier. Now, because I want a slit, I won't be sewing all the way down. I'll stop at the point where I want my slits to begin. So just measure on yourself where you want the slits to start, and if you don't want a front slit, you can just go ahead to sew all the way down. So guys, I'm done stitching. You can see I started from the 13-inch mark. So the part I didn't stitch at the top is for the neckline, while this one is for my front slits. So now I'm going to place the band back on a fold. You can go on to press this down again so it lays flat. Now it's time to attach the collar to the dress, and I'll do that by placing the right side of the collar to the right side of the dress, making sure the raw edges are together. And I'll be stitching from the zipper allowance all the way down to the hemline using a 1/2 inch sewing allowance. So like I said earlier, whatever side of the collar you want facing up is what you'll be placing to the right side of the dress. And when you're done stitching on one side, you place the collar on the other side as well, raw edges together, right sides facing each other, and you stitch from the zipper allowance all the way down to the hemline. So after stitching, here's what we have. You can see my collar has been attached to the dress, and yeah, we're almost done with this. Now I'll go ahead to trim out the excess along the hemline because I need my band longer than 67 inches just in case. And all that's left to do is to attach the zipper to the back of the dress, then finish off the hemline by folding it inwards twice and stitching all the way around. And that's it guys, the dress is ready. So this is the final look and this is how it looks on me. I'm satisfied with the neckline, but I did cut my sleeve shorter than the 10 inches. I ended up using 8 inches before attaching the band. Also, because this fabric is crepe, it's not as stiff as I wanted it to be. You can see that the fabric flows. So if you're using a crepe fabric for this tutorial, don't give as much allowance for ease as I did. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video.